Hey guys, I'm just happy to be back here and to be sharing a little bit about my journey, healing from benzos and symptoms I've had. And my hope for this channel is really that this will be a place of encouragement. There's just so many places where you can hear about different symptoms, and those places I think are probably needed. There's been plenty of times where I'm like, I have this weird symptom, and is there, has anyone else ever had this? And is this normal? And you kind of hear that it is, and it helps you a lot because you get so many strange symptoms during this situation where, burning, twitching, stomach issues, and just things that are just like, what's going on? So there's a place for those, but it's also a place for hope because the fact of the matter is that everything I have read, everything I've heard, people I've talked to that have been through this, like people get better and people go on to just live normal lives again and kind of get back the things they've lost and they move on. We need to remember that because it's just really hard. And we start thinking that this is how our life's going to be forever. And we're just kind of more defeated than we have to be. So that's my hope. I want someone to talk about ways to kind of get from where we're at, if we're depending how much we're suffering to where we want to be. And I mean, reality, there's not a ton we can do, but there are small things I think that we can do kind of as we heal to get better. And what we'll talk about today is we'll talk about just kind of the role of faith. One of the things that I notice sometimes on the different chat rooms and discussions on Facebook is just that people have a hard time wondering like why would God, if he exists, allow this to happen? So this is going to be kind of a video explaining kind of more for people who are believers, people that are Christians, or people that are just interested in hearing about this, maybe have questions about this. Sometimes suffering brings up ultimate life questions like what is the purpose of this? What is the meaning of this? Maybe, before you kind of went into this withdrawal situation, you were, living your life and your life is kind of revolved around something exciting like vacations or a career you really loved or that could have been taken away from you. And maybe you're just like, maybe there's more, maybe there's something else I can kind of like stand on. So that's the idea today. And um, it's been hard. I mean, for me, it's been difficult too. It's one of those things where I think even though I'm a Christian, there's been just a lot of days where I'm like, well, what is this? Why? What is the purpose of this? And I think those are valid questions. Like this is a very difficult kind of suffering, and I just think that all these questions need to be asked. And so I want to kind of just explain a little bit of what I've processed as the years went on. We'll start in the Book of James. And the Book of James is written by James, who is the brother of Jesus. They call him the half brother because they obviously have a different dad. Jesus's dad is God, and Joseph, or perhaps maybe we're not really sure, but James is the half brother. Actually, they're the same mother. So, and also interesting thing about James is that during Jesus' life, he didn't believe in him. He kind of mocked him and was like, "This guy's not God." After he dies and resurrects, you see James I take a leadership role initially, and then he becomes just a pillar of the church. Like he is the leader of Jerusalem, which is the largest church, and he is just he is just well known throughout the Christian world in the first century AD. And he writes this letter to people all over the place. So he writes it to the 12 tribes in the dispersion. That's the 12 tribes of Israel. And the dispersion is, after they leave Jerusalem and they're kind of spread all around the world, around at least the ancient Near East. He's writing to them. So these are Jewish believers mostly. And he says this, he says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. Let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may become perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." And I think a couple important things to note there is that the word steadfastness is this idea of kind of like being like rooted. There's a parable that Jesus talks about. I can hear my kids in the background yelling, I think, but it's a parable Jesus talks about where he talks about building your house on sand versus building it on rock. And he says you can build your house on sand, things that really aren't solid, but when storms come, get washed away. So maybe you can build your house in a career or you can build it on a hobby, but when really hard happens, Klonopin withdrawal or Xanax withdrawal or Valium withdrawal, like you get washed away. And it's just not a stable place to be. But he says some people can build a house on rocks. And there, the stability, like you think about these big tall skyscrapers, and what they do is they go drill deep down into the ground. I read this book recently about, well, it was actually a history book, but it was a lot about architecture in there. And it was a lot of it was how they built the first skyscrapers and just how how far down they had to dig to get into the bedrock so that they could build these really high buildings. That's kind of the idea that like if you're built on rock, you're movable. And so he says that when you have trials of various kinds, so various kinds could be for the Christian, it could be persecution, like people don't like that you're a Christian. It could be um, relational conflict with people, friends, or even family members, or it could be there's various kinds. So different trials that happen in life. It could be sickness, which is kind of in the realm of what we're dealing with here. Um, and so he says when you meet these trials, you should know that this is a test of your faith. So as we wait and as we kind of endure, where our faith is being proven, so we're shown we have faith. And what that does is that produces something in us. So day by day, as we wake up, like oh, another day of symptoms or another night of symptoms, or maybe we have a window and then the wave comes back and you're like, oh man, I just can't believe it's back. Like we need to remember that like this process in us is actually changing the internal makeup of us. Like we're becoming more solid, we're becoming more steadfast, we're becoming less movable. And I think that's something that can encourage us as we're going through this because we're like, is anything good gonna come of this? And I think the answer is yes. Like we're gonna be a different person than we were when we went into this. And I think we're gonna be less movable, less prone to kind of going back and forth as life throws us around. And he says that as the trials produce this steadfastness or this kind of lack of moving, this rootedness, what's going to do is it's going to make us perfect and complete. And it's not perfectly, we don't make mistakes anymore. The idea of that is whole. It's going to make us more whole. I think what Jesus really comes to do is to make us more like the person we should be. We're supposed to be like how human beings were created to be, more relational, more loving, more patient, more kind, more in tune with our creator. And I think that suffering has that. And so that's something that's been giving me hope as I've suffered through this. My wife's been kind of reading this to me over the last year. And one more thing I wanted to share is from the Psalms, and that's from Psalm 40. I don't have it before me right now, but it's written by David, who has had a really hard life. David, if you think about his life, he kind of got pulled out of the field as a little boy to kind of be the leader in the Israel army. And then, one thing after another, just like he starts getting more prominent, and the king just tries to kill him, and then he's kind of running for his life, and then his later on his son's kind of after him, and he makes this horrible mistake and then sins and gets a girl pregnant, and then has her husband killed, and then like lies about it, and then and then he has a baby die, and it's just like David's life is really difficult. But he says in Psalm 40, something to the effect where like I've been young and I've been old, but I've never seen the righteous abandoned by God. So that's something that we can hold on to and believe for Christians going through this protracted withdrawal, bind, acute withdrawal, whatever it is we're going through, to kind of know that like there's a purpose to it. And I think that gives us like a different perspective on suffering than maybe other people would have. And so if you're a Christian, I think that hopefully would be encouraging to you. And then second of all, if you're not a Christian or you're just watching this, you're like, um, you know, maybe just consider like, is there a different perspective I can see this? And is there something that I can kind of zoom out and see a little differently will help me endure this better? And I do believe that. I do believe that you could find that if you would dive a little bit into what the scriptures offer us. So that's what I have. And secondly, I think that like, you know, we just need to keep remembering that this does get better and that everyone heals and that it's a long process. For some, it's a really long process. I mean, for me, I had 2 years of about a year of feeling really bad, 2 years of feeling pretty bad, and I felt pretty good for, a bunch of years, and I messed everything up by just getting so busy and stressed. And now I've had another year of symptoms again. And this faith question, I think, has been interesting to me because, like, what I did was I left from being a teacher and I moved into being pastor. And this the pace and the stress of that really kind of brought my symptoms back because I just wasn't sleeping as much, I wasn't resting, and having too much caffeine, and just all the things that mistakes make that people sometimes have in setbacks. So like a lot of times I'm like, God, why I want to be a pastor? Like, why am I being punished? But I don't think I'm being punished. I think I'm being changed, and I think all of us are being changed in this journey. So, any thoughts? Put in the comments if you want to subscribe. And we do making these videos weekly and talking about things related to just getting better and healing and questions. And I have questions too, so I'll put those out there for people to kind of respond to. But everyone has a good night, and we keep healing, and I'll see you later.